I'm here today with someone that I just admire so very much. I look up to her. I think she's a great person. She's a great friend. She's a great professional. She's done a lot for our community in the judicial world. And I want to introduce Melanie Sellers to everyone. She is our first judicial district public defender and has just gotten reelected to be that again. And so we're also so excited about it. But Melanie, tell us a little bit about yourself. People that watch Hope for the Helpers may be here in our neck of the woods in East Tennessee, but they may be in Honolulu or they may be in, it could be anywhere because, we're on the internet. So share a little bit about you and what you do and why working with the population that are addicted or have a mental health diagnosis is important to you. What would you say?
Sure.
Yeah.
Tennessee is one of the few states that actually has an elected public defender. So I run an office that serves 4 counties. When someone can't afford a lawyer, our office is who the judges appoint to represent them. And prior to having the leadership position, I was an assistant public defender for, 13 years. Prior to that, I was a prosecutor for 12. So I've served on both sides. It's pretty unusual for someone to switch from prosecution to defense, to be honest. There seems to be a perception among some that it's more respectable, I guess, to be a prosecutor. I don't agree with that philosophically. But I got to the point where I really felt like I was processing people. And I thought that I could do more as an advocate for individuals as opposed to an advocate for society at large. That it would be more personable, and it is much more personable. And then I have two children. They're grown now, 24 and 26, 2 grandchildren. But when I reached the point in my life where I was beginning to see individuals in court that had grown up with my children, the same age as my children, and their first foray into the criminal justice system, it really hit home. It really hit home that we need to be more proactive. That our communities need it, individuals need it. That serving the population that we serve. And as you know, most people in the criminal justice system do have substance use issues or mental health issues or both. And that if we're not really addressing those needs, we're not accomplishing anything except filling up the jails, and people don't get better in jail, and many get worse. I mean, the environment is not conducive to rehabilitation at all. So things really changed. In 2017, here in the first district, we started a felony recovery court, and being involved in that process from the beginning, seeing it up close, receiving the training that we receive through the Tennessee Association of Recovery Court Professionals, the national organization. It just, it opened my eyes to a lot of the science behind substance use disorder, a lot of the practicalities regarding relapse. And, it made me a better lawyer overall, just understanding what makes the brain work, seeing success, getting to see success. So that's kind of where I am, to where that, we still, my office still has the traditional role of making sure people are treated fairly. The state has the burden of proof. The trials are fair and do that. But at the same time, understanding that, for those people who are found guilty or who choose plead guilty, that advocacy doesn't end there. Advocating for true um, opportunities for rehabilitation is just as important.
Yeah. Um, well, as you know, Hope for the Helpers is all online. It's just a safe space for families and loved ones, concerned persons of that individual to find encouragement, to find hope, to find resources, or how to find resources even better, because everybody that's watching is not going to be from here, and I can't offer resources for places in California necessarily, but I want to educate people on how to find those resources to help their loved one, and resources, more importantly, in my mind, for the loved one and for the friend or family member, because addiction is a family disease. It's a friend disease. It's something that, as you know, once it affects this one person, everyone around them is affected in a certain way. And I talk all the time about, what are you doing today to help yourself become a better person so that you can be there for your loved one? That's like the biggest thing. And so I'd like for us to talk somewhat about that and how family members and friends can learn more about the judicial system and how everything works so that they can be there for their loved one. And so my first question is, when someone gets arrested for a substance related charge, whether it's use or manufacturing or this, that, and the other, what actually happens step by step? What happens when they get arrested for something?
And let me just say that most charges are substance use related charges. Your auto burglaries, your house burglaries, shoplifting, all that. Most of it does go back to substance use. Stealing to support the addiction, that kind of thing. But when someone is arrested, except in a few special circumstances, when someone is arrested and they're booked into the jail, um, and if they are a user, those first few hours are going to be kind of rough, and so they'll get a phone call, but a lot of the times, when I go and I do jail visits,
Mm-hmm.
for example, in the Carter County Jail, the room where I meet with clients is right off of booking. And so a lot of times I see people being brought in, and the observation cells are right there. So a lot of times people are experiencing drug induced psychosis. And, so those first few hours are hard. And in that situation, they're probably going to be evaluated by medical. There are certain substances where withdrawal can even be deadly,
Yeah.
that kind of thing. So that happens. The individual is going to be arraigned in front of the General Sessions Court judge at the next, most always the very next available court appearance. If you're arrested on Friday night, you're probably going to see the judge on Monday. And at that initial appearance, the judge is going to, depend on whether you're charged with a misdemeanor or felony, he's going to offer you an attorney if you want one. The judge may allow you to choose to speak with the prosecutor if you want to represent yourself and try to work out some sort of agreement.
Mm-hmm.
But that initial appearance, it's not the trial, it's not those kind of things. If you aren't able to work out something with a prosecutor, your case is probably going to be reset for a hearing. And then the court system moves. And again, it just depends. Are you charged with simple possession, a misdemeanor possession of methamphetamine? Are you charged with sale of 200 grams of methamphetamine? You know what I'm saying? So it just depends. And but the process goes from there. But it can last. The process can take a day or two. It can take 2 years. Just so. The important thing.
That's a big difference too.
It is.
1 day or 2 years.
It is, and obviously people may say I'm not objective, but that's why we have lawyers, is to help explain the process to the person and why, in your case, no, you can't get out of jail at that initial appearance. And this is important. Your bond's going to be addressed. Your bond can be lowered. It can be raised. and that's going to really determine whether the individual is able to get out of jail prior to disposition, or whether they're going to remain in custody, depending on their family's resources, their own resources, that kind of thing. So
Let me ask you this. I mean, I'm thinking I've never been arrested. I've never been in jail for except going in there to do a program for the people that were in jail. I've never actually been in jail myself. And I'm just thinking to myself, what would my mother do? If that happened, she would be calling everybody that's in the phone book. She uses a phone book still. Anybody that's in the phone book under, that, and trying to get in touch with people and saying, tell me, I don't know what to do. I have no clue. Where is she? How does this work? What do I need to do? What do I need to pay? And I'm sure you all get tons of phone calls. I mean, do people actually call you directly and say, my child or my husband or my wife or my
some
whoever?
people, some people, um, some people do call. Our office, by statute, can't represent someone until they're appointed by the judge. We
Hmm.
can give not legal advice, but legal education. I guess we'll put
Yeah.
it that
Yeah.
general
Right.
education about the legal system. But my sons would always ask me. They would say, "Mom, if I got arrested, you gonna bum me out?" And my answer was always, "Well, just depend on what I thought was best for you at the time."
Uh-huh.
And
Yeah.
um, it can really, you know, um, it really is objectively. Now, I get it, as a parent or spouse or whatever, you love this person and you hate to see them suffer, but um, there's short-term benefits and then there's long-term benefits.
Yeah.
So I think the first thing I would do, and I know I am a lawyer, but the first thing I would do before I even considered, if I had a loved one in custody, thinking about bond or any other issue, the first thing I would think about is, if I could afford it, the first thing I would think
Yeah.
about would be getting them a good lawyer, because that is who can walk you through the process.
Yeah.
If I couldn't afford it, I would, tell my loved one, hey, when you're arraigned, ask for the public defender, ask for a lawyer,
Mhm.
because one, the lawyer can answer your questions, but the lawyer also is going to um, advocate for you, and,
Yeah.
and uh, that's just so important. So
Yeah. 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 Okay. Well, let's talk about charges and consequences and things like that. So, what does the court look at when deciding if a person is going to be sentenced to treatment or to jail? How does that happen? Because there are those options, I'm
yeah,
assuming. I mean, I
sure,
believe that, I mean, I've seen that. So, the family members, friends that are watching, what should they know about that, and what are the deciding factors usually
sure.
that you've seen?
Well, first of all, here in Tennessee, we do have some offenses that have mandatory incarceration.
Hmm.
Um, and frankly, the way our legislature is moving, the number of offenses, it's growing. The number of offenses that are mandatory
Hmm.
incarceration. Um, if you are convicted of possession of a Schedule One drug, such as heroin, for
Hmm.
example,
Hmm.
if you're with intent to sell or deliver, um, that's a non-probatable offense because it's Schedule One. Now, that if you're convicted as charged, okay, so there are some of those charges where there are things in the statute that just the judge doesn't have much discretion if you're convicted as charged. For those cases where there is discretion, first of all, um, the the opinion of the prosecutor's office is going to affect plea negotiation. Just to be honest, at least here, 95% of cases resolved by agreement. So, is how open is the prosecutor's office to rehabilitation and alternative sentencing? Uh, and, then it may be up to the judge to decide. If it's up to the judge to decide, there are certain statutory factors in our law that the legislature has said this is what you're supposed to consider. Um, and it really is very, very case specific, and it is defendant specific. So
Hmm.
if you have someone who's never been in trouble before, who has uh, a great social history, a great work history, um, they've supported their family, and then maybe this is their first foray into the criminal justice system. Obviously, the court's going to see that as a person who of character. I hate to use that word, but where rehabilitation is obviously going to be the goal. Um, then you have people who have a long criminal history, where rehabilitation has been tried multiple times or very recently and not been successful. And then that's when the court is going to say, well, we've tried that again and maybe even again, and so we're moving into more of a keep incarcerate you to keep you away from society sort of thing. And that's very sad, but that's kind of what they look at. But then also there's just some sort facts and circumstances that are just so egregious, that it may even be the first time, but under that circumstance that the court may say that society demands a more punitive response than a rehabilitative response.
Yeah.
So those things matter. Um, and what's changing over the years is, when I started late '90s, um, there really was the mindset that people could just flip a switch. If they it was just a matter of willpower to flip that switch. And I think
Yeah.
everyone knows that's not the case anymore with substance use disorder, that there are changes to your brain. You can't just turn it off. You can't just say no. And that relapse is a part of recovery. That awareness
Yes.
has grown, that
Yes.
relapse is a part of recovery.
Mhm.
Um, if an individual is working in the recovery and they do relapse, but they don't abscond, they don't run, they go to their probation officer and they say, I've relapsed. I'm being honest about my relapse. How do we, how are we going to deal with this? The court is much more likely to continue to work with that person because they're showing up and they're doing the work. So it is a part of addictive thinking to put your head in the sand, and when things begin to spiral and go wrong, to just kind of, but the core, that's the worst thing an individual can do.
Mhm.
you know
Yeah.
um the honesty and acknowledging, hey, I didn't use the tools I learned, I didn't, whatever it is, that can make a big difference in outcome.
And I think that's for sure something that we see, because I work in treatment, we see that an awful lot, two different things. Number one, people relapse over again. I mean, and it's part of it. And sometimes it takes somebody just one time or two times maybe, and then they're good for the rest of their life. Other people, they've relapsed 10 times, 15 times, and they still can't get there. Um, and there's all sorts of things out there to help with that, whether it's medication, whether it's counseling, whether it's, some sort of a program. AA and NA programs. There's a million different ways to recovery, as you and I both know, and it just depends on what's the right way for that individual. For me, in my active addiction, it was like at the tail end of it, I was saying I don't want to get this prescription anymore because I was getting it off from my doctor, and my doctor was like, "Okay, well, this is way back when we didn't even know that much about addiction as much as we do now." And I just knew that I didn't want whatever this was causing me. And so, I went home and detoxed on my own. It was absolutely the worst thing in the world. I could have died. I'm sure I could have killed somebody. I could have killed myself. I was not homicidal, but suicidal at times. Um, and so we see that with individuals constantly, that, that relapse has to be something we have to educate the family and the loved ones about that it is part of it, that it is not, that your loved one is a bad person and they just couldn't say no or didn't have enough willpower, whatever. It is part of it. It's the drug or the substance, whatever their substance is. It's like air. You cannot get up out of bed. You cannot put one foot in front of the other unless that's in you. And I know too well how that feels. The other part is, um, I think the loved ones and the significant others and friends, they want to help, but they don't know really how to help. And I think you hit something so important is just becoming educated about the disease of addiction. If you can get your hands on as much information about the disease of addiction and learn how it works, then that's part of, I mean, that's like 50% of the game and trying to help your person. You end up not reacting the wrong ways and et cetera, et cetera.
I think too, and you and I have discussed this previously, you know, love love is powerful,
Mm-hmm.
and um, there's a fine line between being helpful and being an enabler.
Yes.
Um, and you know, loved ones crave so much to hear, uh, you
Mhm.
know, their loved ones say, I'm going to do it this time. I'm going to, and they want to help,
Mhm.
and they rush in, and they don't have the expertise. They
Mhm.
don't. They haven't educated themselves, and I'm a big fan of letting the experts be the experts, and I mean this for me too. You know,
Sure. Yeah.
they don't teach uh, uh, they don't teach you anything about substance use disorder or schizophrenia psychology class. I don't, you know,
Right.
anything I know is based on experience and some training that I have had. But, a lot of what goes in to choose how to treat a specific individual is a clinical decision
Yes.
and should be made by an expert. And so
Mhm.
what we get a lot of times, and is mamas will call, you know,
Mhm.
little Johnny's in jail, and I got him in this program. I've got him in this program, and this is what it is, and this is where I want him to go, and I've already got it all arranged and all of that. And, you know, based on my experience and training, I know that's not the right program. Or I know based on their criminal history that even though that program might be okay from a clinical perspective, that the court is not going to find it acceptable because it doesn't have the level of supervision or
Yeah.
by the criminal justice system that the court is going to find acceptable. The court may say this may be a good program, but based on your history, I want you behind a fence.
Yeah.
I don't want you sleeping on mama's couch and
Yes.
just going to treatment every day, driving to treatment. I want you somewhere. So, you know, um, I've had parents in particular, sometimes girlfriends, boyfriends, but I've had to say,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I need you to back off. I need you to
Yeah.
back off. Let the experts be the expert. You love them, you encourage them, but in terms of trying to navigate them into a particular treatment resource that will work with whatever they're facing in the criminal justice system. Let the experts be the experts,
Yeah.
and
I agree. So very
that's
important.
yeah, and even understanding there are a lot of frankly there are a lot of lawyers and judges even that don't understand the different levels of care available to individuals with substance use disorder.
Yeah.
You mentioned AA and NA meetings, and that's
Mhm.
one end of the spectrum. And then, inpatient treatment is at the very other end of the spectrum. And there are all sorts of things in between.
A million things in
And
there.
maybe you need to do both. Maybe
Yeah.
you need multiple. Maybe you need to start out in inpatient and step down into this, and you also need transitional housing, and it's complicated, and we are getting to the point where there are enough resources in the community, at least that we can connect people with to get a good assessment. Um,
Yep. And some of the
and,
people I've had on here, you know, have been,
and
I've had
and
people come
determine
on here.
what has the highest likelihood of success.
I've had other speakers, you know, on Hope for the Helpers, and I've had ones talk specifically about all the different types of housing because there's a million different types. I said, what's the difference between sober living, transitional housing, recovery housing?
Mhm.
You know, there's all these different terms, and they all mean something a little bit different, which means that organization is run a little differently. And so all those, you know, all those things. And,
Mhm.
you know, as a loved one, you're like, oh, well, they need a place to live. And somebody would say, well, what about this place? And they'll go, okay, sure. Well, they have no idea that there's all these different ones and
Yeah.
they all mean something a little different and which one will be right for their person. And just like you said, with treatment, there's everything from, okay, I'm just going to go to AA or NA meetings to, well, there's a plethora of different meetings too. There's the faith-based meetings, the
Right.
regular AA, you know, there's the ones for the loved ones, blah, blah, blah. And then you go to all the treatment, the partial hospitalization, the intensive outpatient, the, you know, residential treatment, and then MAT treatment, which is all just outpatient, you know. I mean, there's 100 million more than that. And that is a lot of information for someone to have to know. And I know
Sure.
that family members really struggle with all that. Yeah.
And to be frank about it,
Mhm.
there are organizations operating that um, maybe. Let me give you an example. Um, a lot of our local jails have organizations that will come in and help people get signed up with treatment,
Mhm.
but they don't even know, oh, this person has a mandatory sentence. So I'll have clients, the first time I speak to them, who'll say, oh, I've signed up for this sort of treatment. I've got a bed available. Here it is. And I'm like, well, I'm sorry, your case is going to have to go to criminal court, and this may be a 6, 7, 8 month process, and I don't think the judge is going to be satisfied with the 28-day program. I think they're going to want you in something longer, those kind of things. And I always tell my clients, be patient. Let's work through this together. Don't be signing up for stuff without
Yeah.
without me helping you through that process. And let's not be taking up beds that you've signed up for that you're not going to get to because you're still going to be in jail. I mean, let's not do that either. So
Yeah.
that does happen. And it's a good problem to have, that we have so many people working so hard
Mhm.
to help people. It's a great problem to have. But as the problem has grown and our resources have grown, there's some growing pains of,
Yeah.
okay, maybe we need to streamline this a little bit, or maybe we need to take a minute and say, hey, let's assess them. Let's assess them properly. Let's, talk to everybody that needs to be, involved, and make the decision about what kind of treatment they need in their circumstance. So,
Yeah. Um, let's switch and talk about reentry a little bit.
mhm.
When someone is released from whether they're in jail or in prison, whichever one, what kind of support have you seen that works best? What do you feel like it needs to be in place for that person before they, you know, get let out of the door, before they say goodbye, you're finished, have a great life. There's things while they are serving their time that they can do and that their family and friends can help them with. What would those things be?
Well, I think one of the saddest situations is, and of course, this is the client population I serve, is
Mhm.
when someone is walking out of that jail and they don't have anyone in the world to call except for their using buddies. And
Yeah.
there's always going to be one that's going to pick them up.
Yeah.
It's that misery loves company sort of thing. And that's the saddest thing. So, um, understanding that when someone is released from jail, that really is the most dangerous time for overdose.
Yes.
That someone who has been an opioid user, and maybe they were using fentanyl, and then they go to jail and they're in jail for 6 months, and they walk and they exit the jail, the dose they were using might kill them now
Yes.
because, they've lost some tolerance to the judge. So it can be the most dangerous sort of
Most
jail.
critical.
So we try really hard when we have someone, whether it's part of their alternative sentencing plan or whether they are just um, finishing a sentence and they're through with the court system. We have a social worker in our office, and we try when they're open to it to have some place for them to land.
Mhm.
um, and that's where the sober living comes into place, the transitional housing. um, we have some good programs around where um, maybe if they go to straight from jail to inpatient treatment,
Mhm.
while they're at inpatient treatment, they'll go work with them on finding housing to go from there.
Yeah.
And
Mhm.
maybe there's some money available to pay for a month or two before they can get a job and get back in. So, I think working to have a specific plan is important. And I think with families, understanding that um, sometimes their loved one, again, they've not flipped the switch. They may have been in jail 6 months, but they've not flipped the switch, and that they might need the support
Mhm.
of sober living or transitional housing, or some gradual return.
Mhm.
Um, putting someone back in we talk about the sandbox. Putting someone back in the same sandbox can cause problems,
Yeah.
and um, you know, with families and family relationships, um, if people with substance use disorder, a lot of times they burn some bridges,
Mhm.
and those sometimes need to be built back slowly and carefully, and that's okay. That's okay. A lot of times that is the right thing to do. And maybe your loved one needs to go into transitional housing, and maybe you need to try to reintegrate with them through some family counseling or those kind of things first before just welcome them home and saying, here's your bedroom.
Yeah.
So
And
again,
that
involving professionals in that can be very helpful.
that right there reminds me of I have well, it's more than one. It's two or three women that over the years, the past 15 years, have reached out to me multiple times each. They each have someone, it's either a son or a husband or a friend or something that they are housing. They are letting live in their residence, and they'll say to me, they're going to do it this time. I really feel like they're going to do it, but and then the next thing I know, they'll send me something. Say, I've got to find a place for them to go. I've got to find a place for them to go to treatment or something because this keeps happening again and again. And I always say, well, of course, I'm not a doctor. I'm not a clinical person. I'm not a legal person. I'm neither of those. But just from my experience in watching things that happen, I would say to you, do whatever you have to do to not house them because they need to find their own way of supporting themselves. And when they do that, a switch does flip and they go, oh, I've got to find a way to support myself. So what am I going to have to do? It's like that is the hardest thing for people to leave that safety net of where they're living. Um, if they're in that environment, everything is done for them and they don't have to do for themselves and they can be using and do all that and it not bother them. And they don't have to have a job necessarily. But once you don't have a place to lay your head every night, a switch does start to flip. It may not be all the way on, but the thought is coming back into their mind of, okay, I got to get with it here. How am I going to do this? And so
Well,
that's been my, yeah.
and you know this.
Mhm.
Yeah, you know this. You've seen it. You're part of it. Um, Friends I have that have been successful in long term recovery, a lot of it has come from the support of the recovery community. You know,
Yeah. Mhm.
when someone in recovery goes into transitional housing, or they start going to groups, and they make those connections within the recovery community, that is a support
Yes.
that is different and
Mhm.
sometimes better than what they can receive from people who haven't experienced it.
Yeah.
That's someone. So, it's amazing to me, when we have a recovery court graduation, day reporting center graduation, whatever it is, and the recovery court community shows up,
They show up.
they
Mhm.
show up. It's amazing. And you don't want to deprive your loved one of that support.
Right.
And if you haven't seen it, you wouldn't believe it.
Mhm.
The recovery
There's
community
power
is
in the
some of the
peer.
most. Oh, they're so gracious. They
Yes.
would give you the shirt off their back,
Mhm.
and it's powerful. It's powerful.
Yes.
So,
Mhm.
don't deprive your loved one of that resource.
Yeah. Yeah. Make sure that, if you're going to push them in one direction or another, that's the direction to go.
Right.
Find,
Right.
find your people because they will do anything for you, and they will tell you the hard stuff. They will call you out when you're not doing something, right, and they will call you out if you are doing something that's going to help you progress forward. They will give you your props for that, and they will be there for you regardless, whether you're on the good or the bad side of your
Mhm.
addiction right now. And they'll be there for you, but they're not going to sugarcoat things.
Right.
And that helps so much. It's amazing. Yeah, I always say the power of the peer, because that truly is, that peer person is an amazing part of the recovery journey for sure. Last question, because I know I've kept you here for quite a while, but my last question is, what can give the loved one hope? What is that piece of hope that you have seen that you can share with our viewers and let them know that, what, there's hope out there. There's a way through this. Is there a story of someone you could share, or a glimmer of hope that you want to share?
I can I have to remind myself, even though I get to see it. Um, I we should put limits on God's grace.
Right. Hmm.
We it I have seen miracles. I mean, truly. And you know, it's easy to become cynical, especially a number of people will see and will say, "Oh, that person will never make
Sure.
it," or this one. And the number of times that I have been, you know, humbled by someone proving us all wrong,
Yeah.
and there is no amount of trauma, abandonment. Um, there is nothing that can't be overcome. And
Yes.
you know, I I've seen I've seen people that I prosecuted many years ago, that
Yeah.
I defended many years ago, and it may be 13 years later, but something finally did it. I don't want to I don't breach any confidentiality,
Of
with
course. Yeah.
particular clients or that kind of thing. But um, miracles are real in this world, and um, I tell people, one of my favorite parables is, um, where the shepherd left the 99 in the fold to go chase the one, and so
Yes.
we need
Right.
to always go be chasing the one, always be
Chasing the one.
chasing the one. And
Yes.
so it may take multiple tries, but there is always hope. So,
There's always hope. It can always happen. It can
yeah.
always happen. Well, I can't thank you enough for sharing all your wealth of wisdom and knowledge,
Thank
and
you, Angela.
the heart part. Just all of it was great. And it's very obvious why you are the people's choice for
Thank you.
your role. It's very, very obvious why. And I watch what you do, and I've watched what you've done, over the years, after, because we were together on a board once before, and I've watched as you've, done other things. And, your heart is as big as Texas,
Well,
and
thank
it
you.
shows. So,
I appreciate that very much.
okay. So, again, for those of you that are viewing, if you would like a free resource guide, you can go to Hope for the Helpers, which is hope at the number 4, thehelpers.com, and just hit the button that says, I want my free resource guide, and I will email you the free resource guide that I put together that serves as a good place to start for anywhere in the nation, where you may be living.